It's April the 12th, 1961, and the Vostok 1 capsule has started its re-entry to Earth's atmosphere. However, all is not well. The service module, which should have separated from the re-entry capsule, is still attached. High above Egypt, the little spacecraft is being thrown into wild gyrations as the two parts heat up in the upper atmosphere. Inside the capsule, the first man in space, Yuri Gagarin, assesses the situation as he experiences up to 10 times the force of gravity. In his own words, there was a moment, about 2 to 3 seconds, when the data on the control gauges started looking blurry. It was starting turning grey in my eyes. Yuri Gagarin was born on March the 9th, 1934, in Klushino, a small village just over 100 miles west of Moscow. His family were peasants before the revolution, and when Yuri was born, were working on a collective farm. During the war, Klushino was occupied by the Germans. The Gagarin residence was commandeered by a German officer, and the Gagarins lived in a 9-square-meter mud hut in the land behind the house. The Germans sent 2 of Yuri's older brothers to work as slave labor in Poland. After the war, the family moved to Gzhatsk, and age 16, Yuri went to work as an apprentice in a steel plant. During this time, he took evening classes and after graduation moved to Saratov, where he studied tractors at the Saratov Industrial Technical School. He volunteered at the local flying club, flying on weekends as an air cadet. To make ends meet, he also worked as a dock laborer on the Volga River. In 1955, at the age of 21, he was admitted to Air Force Pilot School in Orenburg, and shortly after started training on the MiG-15. At 5 feet 2 inches, or 157 centimeters, Gagarin wasn't tall by today's standards. He struggled landing the 2-seater trainer and was almost dismissed from pilot training. He was given one last chance to successfully land the MiG-15. Yuri's instructor gave him a cushion to sit on to improve his view, and Yuri landed the aircraft without any issue. In 1957, Yuri became a lieutenant in the Soviet Air Force, and towards the end of 1959, at the age of 25, he volunteered for the Soviet space program. The selection program was rigorous. Pilots had to be between the ages of 25 to 30, weigh less than 72 kilograms or 159 pounds, and be below 5 feet 7 inches tall. 154 pilots were shortlisted and went through the intense psychological and physical tests. Finally, just 20 were approved. The men trained together and Gagarin was hugely popular. When the trainees were asked to vote who should be the first pilot to go into space, all but 3 voted for Yuri. The State Commission meeting on April the 8th, 1961, just 4 days before the flight, nominated that Yuri Gagarin would be the primary pilot, and Yuri's friend and colleague, German Titov, should be his backup. On the day of the launch in the bus on the way to the launch pad, Gagarin needed to pee. He asked the bus driver to stop and christened the back right-hand tire of the bus. This tradition still continues today, with all pilots taking off from Baikonur. The women cosmonauts prepare a cup so they too can splash the rear wheel. Gagarin entered the Vostok 1 at 0410 UTC and was strapped in. Launch was 2 hours away. Gagarin talked to Capcom and to Korolev. Korolev was a genius behind the Soviet space program and was so nervous he had to be given a pill to calm him. At this time, 50% of Soviet launches were unsuccessful, and everyone was aware of the odds. Unbelievably, during this time, Yuri asked for some music to be played and was described as calm. Half an hour prior to launch, his pulse was just 64 beats per minute. 3 press releases were already prepared, 2 for failure and 1 for success. At 0607 AM UTC, the engines fired and the launch began. Gagarin famously said, "Поехали," or "Let's go," followed by "Goodbye until we meet soon, dear friends," and Yuri Gagarin became the first man in space. Gagarin had no control of the spacecraft. The Soviet scientists were unsure what the effects of space would be, so to play it safe, they put a series of codes into a sealed envelope that Gagarin would open under exceptional circumstances, so that he could initiate the landing procedure himself. 11 minutes after liftoff, as the Vostok 1 capsule passed over the Soviet Union, Gagarin reported, "The craft is operating normally. I can see the Earth in the viewport. Everything is proceeding as planned." No one knows exactly what went through his mind at this time. He had time to eat and drink during his 108-minute orbit of the Earth. As a consummate professional, he was surely focused on his mission. However, the incredible achievement of getting a man into space just 16 years after the USSR was devastated by war could not have been lost on him. 53 minutes into the flight at 7 a.m. UTC, as Vostok 1 passed over the Strait of Magellan at the tip of South America, Radio Moscow announced the news that the Soviet Union had put a man into space. News that was to shake the world. The flight had been designed so that if retrofire was unsuccessful, Yuri would fall to Earth naturally after 10 days. The orbit was higher than planned though, and so natural orbit would have been 20 days, far longer than Yuri's supplies would last. Fortunately, retrofire occurred successfully about 1 hour into the flight and started to bring Yuri home. It was a very bumpy ride due to the faulty separation of service module and capsule. Gagarin wrote, "The spacecraft started spinning around its axis at very high speed. One moment I see Africa, another moment the horizon, another the sky. I barely had time to shade myself from the sun, so the light did not blind my eyes. But I did not close the blinds. I wanted to find out myself what was going on." Finally, over the Mediterranean Sea, the modules separated. There is still debate as to why this happened. Some have speculated that cables burned through in re-entry, separating the modules. Some that temperature sensors triggered separation. However, the separation did occur, and the Sharik re-entry capsule successfully entered the atmosphere. The bright glow of re-entry was visible behind the window shields. The thermal protection crackled, and an alarming smell of burning entered the capsule. At a height of 7 kilometers, Gagarin jettisoned the hatch and he ejected from the capsule, still strapped into his ejection seat. Gagarin landed separate to his capsule, a fact the Soviets lied about until 1971. The rules for the record book set by the FIA in 1961 stated that the pilot had to land with the spacecraft to be considered for the record, a rule that was later changed. Gagarin landed on a farm 500 miles south of Moscow by parachute in his bright orange spacesuit, near a farmer and her daughter. They were scared and started to back off in fear. Gagarin called out, "I am a Soviet citizen like you, who has descended from space, and I must find a telephone to call Moscow." Gagarin was awarded the Hero of the Soviet Union, and in Russia he was loved by the people, who called him Yura, which is the friendly form of Yuri. The world embraced the brave young cosmonaut and his winning smile as he went on tour visiting 30 countries around the globe, although JFK barred him from entering the US. Gagarin restarted pilot training, but the authorities were reluctant to have him fly again. To risk losing him would have been a disaster. He was backup for his friend, Vladimir Komarov, on the Soyuz 1 flight. Soyuz 1 was rushed due to political pressures, and Gagarin was unhappy with the safety of the craft. When Soyuz 1 crashed after its parachute failed to open, Gagarin was banned from any further space flights. The impact of Gagarin's achievement spurred the United States into action and pushed the moon landings forward, with JFK announcing in 1962, "We choose to go to the moon." On the 27th of March 1968, Yuri was on a training flight in a MiG-15 UTI. There are a number of theories as to what happened, including bird strike and a near miss with another plane, but it seems the aircraft entered into a spin that couldn't be recovered. The ashes of Gagarin and his flight instructor, who was also on the plane, are in the walls of the Kremlin. The Apollo astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin left a memorial to Gagarin and Komarov on the moon. Yuri wrote a note to his wife prior to his spaceflight in the event of an accident. She was given the note 7 years later, after his plane crash. It talks of his hopes for his daughters and his wife and finishes, "Goodbye, my dears. I embrace you all tight and kiss you. Your dad and Yura."
Кедр, я Заря. Как чувствуете прием?